Sure. Well, good morning. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. And for those of you who are watching online across the state of Minnesota, we welcome you as well. And we'll have for you a number of speakers who are going to talk about the hands-free law in Minnesota. Make no mistake, this law will help save lives and make our roads safer as it goes into effect on August 1. From paid advertising, social media, word of mouth, through the media, our goal is that no Minnesotan should have any or be surprised by this law and what it entails and the fact that it goes into effect August 1. Another key component for education is our partners across the state. We have several speakers here today that reflect that partnership and the work that they are doing. Our first speaker today will be the Office of Traffic Safety Director Mike Hansen. He'll talk about our campaign and our efforts by the Department of Public Safety to educate Minnesotans about the law. Colonel Matt Langer from the Minnesota State Patrol will talk about some of the frequently asked questions we've been receiving from the public about the law. Bob Johnson is here to discuss the efforts of the Insurance Federation of Minnesota. John Hausladen from the Minnesota Trucking Association will discuss how they're getting the word out to the trucking industry. Paulette Groshans from the Health East Care System, part of the Fairview Health Services, will tell us how they will be educating their patients about the law. And Paul Austin from the Minnesota Safety Council will talk about their efforts to reach out to Minnesota businesses and employers. We'll start with Director Mike Hansen.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Bruce. My name is Mike Hansen. I currently have the privilege of serving as the Director for the Department of Public Safety Office of Traffic Safety. As we get closer to the enactment date of the hands-free law, August 1st, 2019, we want to make sure that every Minnesotan knows what they can and what they can't do when the law goes into effect. Since the hands-free law was signed by Governor Walz, over 1.5 million people have visited our website and have received information on what the hands-free law entails. Starting in early July, really next week, and then really ramping up the week after that, you're going to see a large media campaign that is going to be waged across the entire state with the sole purpose of making sure that every Minnesotan has the information that they need in order to comply with the law and to make Minnesota roads safer. Our campaign will include radio, billboards, digital ads, online messaging, and a number of public service announcements that we have all compiled. We don't want anybody to be surprised when the law goes into effect August 1st. We want everybody to be informed so you can make good, safe driving decisions. We're also going to be reaching out to Minnesota's many diverse communities. We currently have all of our material being translated into Somali, Spanish, and Hmong, and we will have those materials available for anybody who needs them. In addition to our paid campaign, we're reaching very hard to reach all the corners of Minnesota. We've talked to radio stations and other media outlets in Grand Forks, in Duluth, in Rochester, in St. Cloud, across the metro. There's not a group out there that we won't talk to. So if you're a business, if you're a civic group, or some other community organization, if you want somebody to come and talk to you about hands-free, please reach out to us at the Department of Public Safety, and we will find somebody to come and address those questions with your groups. Our efforts started the very day that Governor Walz signed the law into effect when we stood up our website, handsfreemn.org. For anybody that has questions, we really urge you to go to that website because it's an incredible wealth of information having to do with the law, what you can do, what you can't do, and things like that. All of those frequently asked questions that many of you have out there are posted on there. And for a little bit more comment on some of those questions, I'd invite Colonel Langer up here to give a little bit of a conversation.
Thanks, Director Hansen. My name is Matt Langer. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Chief of the Minnesota State Patrol. As Director Hansen said, one of the best resources for Minnesotans to learn about this law is the website handsfreemn.org. Within that website, you'll find a frequently asked questions document that we created and have been evolving all along as questions come in so we can make sure that we're being as efficient and effective as possible with answering the questions that Minnesotans have. Some of those questions include the frequent, can I use my phone as a GPS? And the answer to that question is you can, as long as you're using it as a GPS in hands-free mode. So entering the address before you leave is preferred. Entering the address while you're driving is only allowed if you can do it safely and only if you're doing it in hands-free mode. Another question we've gotten all along is, can I attach my phone to a headscarf, a hijab, or some other type of head garment? And the answer to that question is you can, as long as you're operating your phone in hands-free mode, and as long as, however, you have the phone attached to an item of clothing, as long as it's done safely and it's secure and it doesn't interfere with your vision. One other question we get is, can I watch YouTube on my phone? The answer to that one is easy. It's no. The law specifically prohibits watching videos and specifically prohibits playing games, swiping on your phone, or looking at content. And video content is explicitly prohibited. Another question we get is, how does this affect my teen driver? Because of provisional driver's licenses or permit holders. And the easy answer to that question is twofold. Number one is what the law says, and number two is what you can say as a parent. So parents can create their own rules. They can create their own laws in their houses, and we encourage parents to do that for young drivers for obvious reasons. But the law says that you have to, in a provisional license, you're prohibited from using a cell phone while driving. The only exception is if you're using that phone as a GPS, and in that case, you have to follow the hands-free law. And in any event with young drivers, we just urge caution, and we urge parents to talk to young drivers about the dangers of being distracted, because it's especially problematic for those youngest of drivers. One of the questions that we've gotten most recently is a smartwatch, an Apple Watch, or some other device on your hand. That's treated the same under the hands-free law. So can you wear your watch and look at it to see what time it is? Yes, you can, as long as you're doing that safely. Can you wear your watch and read a text message that comes in on your watch? And the answer to that question is yes, you can, as long as you're doing that safely. What you can't do is touch the smartwatch and operate it to compose a text, to compose an email, to play a game, or to look at some other web content or watch a video. So the watch is the same as a hands-free device. Our goal is really about education right now. August 1st, the law goes into effect. We've been working hard all across the state of Minnesota to educate. Our goal is absolutely to educate, to prevent the potential for crashes, serious injuries, and fatal crashes, and to prevent the enforcement action that we will start taking come August 1st. We want people to pay 100% of their attention toward the task of driving and to minimize distractions. Just because you're hands-free does not mean you're distraction-free. So we're not encouraging the use of cell phones while driving. We are educating about the law and encouraging drivers to put 100% of their attention toward driving. I'll be available for questions after, but now I want to invite Bob up to talk about the efforts of the Insurance Federation of Minnesota. Bob.
Thank you, Colonel Langer. Bob Johnson, I'm the president of the Insurance Federation of Minnesota, and just delighted to be here today. And just to echo a couple of these messages, that as the debate went on in the last couple of years on the hands-free bill, we brought to the table the issue of the economic impact, and there is an economic impact on Minnesotans who drive, the 3+ million licensed drivers. My members write a majority of the auto insurance sold in the state, and that was a message that really complemented, if you will, and helped the families that made the human cost impact. But make no mistake about it, starting August 1st, and as we move forward, including this very important education campaign to change the thinking and the behavior of Minnesota drivers, as other states are doing, and not only the human cost benefit, the economic cost benefit to drivers of doing this is vital. We're fully engaged, our members are. I've got member companies that are doing the distribution of these kinds of information and these talking points to their employees. Companies, handle all their individual policyholder communications, so that's just a work in progress with our members. But and so we continue to encourage that using the materials that are referenced here. But frankly, what we want to do is avoid these. We don't call them accidents, we call them crashes. There is, as you have heard this, there's nothing accidental about driving a car and picking up your phone and staring at it. It's a crash, it's not an accident. So for us, we believe is going to be an economic benefits the states have enacted. I'll just end with just two examples of from our member companies, and some of you have probably seen some of this, that Federated Insurance, a Owatonna-based Minnesota company, has been involved with a Please Make It Home Safe campaign. Maybe some of you have seen some of the TV spots that they've run on that. Federated is an example as companies are doing risk management with their employers, and Mr. Hausladen will be talking more about that. But distracted driving impacts employers' workers' compensation costs. So it's not only personal auto, it's workers' compensation. So Federated Insurance is an example of doing extensive training with their many employer customers. And then lastly, another company here just down the street, Travelers Insurance, and some of you may have seen, is doing a nationwide campaign. It's called Every Second Matters, Unfinished Stories. So if you haven't seen those two videos, including one of the lead voices up at the Capitol and in the public, VJ Dixit, and the story of his daughters, his family, and his daughter who was killed by a distracted driver. And so that's a nationwide campaign to not only, to honor the lives, but also to inspire action in terms of moving forward and getting the beneficial impact to us as a society to moving to hands-free. So with that, we'll have John Hauslot now.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this very important topic. Professional truck drivers have been operating in a hands-free mode for over a decade now because federal regulation requirements. But trucking companies understand that even without a federal regulation, it's the right thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. And we know from over a decade of experience driving hands-free that it can be done safely and without negatively impacting our ability to deliver the nation's goods. And while we have what's going on in the truck cab covered, we know that we have to drive this behavior to every trucking company employee, whether they are driving a company vehicle or their own personal car. Our organization and the partners up here have been working with over 30 statewide business and advocacy groups, from grocers to road builders to the state chamber, to share this message with their employees. Distracted driving is a major risk to our most important asset, the men and women that we work alongside every day. And this is not just a business decision. This is a personal decision. And this would be my personal point. This is a change in culture. It's a change in attitude. It's making a decision to make a call before you even leave. Leaving time before you get to the destination on the back end, building in time so you can make the call after you arrive. It's even doing something as simple as changing the message on your own cell phone, which says, I can't take your call right now, I'm away from my phone, or I'm driving. That's a powerful personal statement that we can make to help drive the message home that distracted driving is a major, major issue. We know that our employees are mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, sons and daughters. They are people to everyone out there on the road. And so we are driving this message so that everyone gets home to their family safely at the end of the workday.
Good morning. I'm Polly Grohans. I'm the Director of Trauma for Healthy's Care Systems, which is part of Fairview Health Services. We're committed to community safety education as well as injury prevention. We see the impact of distracted driving almost every day, and we care for those victims in our emergency departments. Partnering with the Department of Public Safety is part of that approach to injury prevention, which includes our bike helmet education, car seat safety, seatbelt use, and falls prevention. Motor vehicle crashes are obviously the most common instance of distracted driving practices. These result in not only occupant injuries, but pedestrians, motorcyclists, and bicyclists are also impacted by this. Fairview's trauma system will partner with our emergency departments at our 12 emergency facilities throughout both the Twin Cities and our outstate facilities. We will have our educational information on hand that we receive from the Department of Public Safety, and it will be available not only to our patients in the emergency departments, but for families, employees, and visitors that are at our facilities. Our plan right now is to hand out that education upon discharge to patients and families coming out of our emergency departments as it's appropriate for the care that they've received. We are so proud to be part of this partnership with the State Patrol and Department of Public Safety so that we can prevent further injuries and also educate another way for us to prevent injuries. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Paul Austin. I'm the president of the Minnesota Safety Council, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with great partners. Everyone behind me on this podium has been a huge partner in this push, as well as literally hundreds of other business organizations, families, friends, and coworkers that have helped push hands-free forward. This is not a small effort, and it's not a flash-in-the-pan effort. This is an effort that's been growing for a long time. And let me just help wrap all this up with some bits of information around what a normal day is like in Minnesota and what some employers can do and think about in their role in this process. If today is a normal day in Minnesota, there'll be about 200 car crashes, there'll be 1 death, and there'll be about 100 injuries. And I'm going to focus really on those injuries. 20 to 25 of those 100 injuries today will be because of distracted driving. If we can get people to put down their phones and start to prevent 1 or 5 or 10 or 20 of those injuries, that's a life change for the people who would have been involved in that event. So that's item number 1. Item number 2 has to do with a question we've been hearing about, well, this is a metro area problem. This isn't an issue in greater Minnesota. True, metro has 2 out of 3 crashes in a given day, but the greater Minnesota area in a given year has 3 out of 4 fatalities. The fatalities occur in greater Minnesota. So distraction is an even bigger issue when you're traveling at higher speeds on more uncontrolled roads in a different place and time than you are on a controlled freeway in the metro. So this is not solely a metro area issue, it's a statewide issue. Lastly, in terms of employers are in a very unique position in this whole mix. Number 1, the bottom line for employers are the same as it is for any other citizen. Whether it's a corporate phone in a corporate car, or a private phone in a corporate car, or a private phone in a private car, if you're out there on company business and you're driving, you have to operate hands-free. Bottom line. But corporations have a different view of this as well. They value that employee, they value the work they can get done, and they value the risk to their liability and their bottom line. We heard from the insurance industry about the impact on workers' comp. So they have an opportunity if they choose to go past that. And that is something that we're encouraging employers to take a look at. Take a look at your policies. Make sure they line up with hands-free on the bottom line, but also ask yourself, do you have other risks you want to cover? And to that end, to date, the Safety Council has reached over 4,000 employees at over 400 companies. If you stretch out that network to the coalition of everybody that I talked about earlier, you can add another 3,000 employees and students into it. So that's a lot. That's a lot in 2 months, but that's a drop in the bucket. We've got a lot more people in Minnesota to reach, like over 5 million. So all of us are starting here today, and we're all happy to answer questions. And one last item, I'll go back to where the colonel was. The law tells you what you can do with your phone. We are not suggesting you should do those things with your phone. If you must use your phone, please use it hands-free, but ask yourself, do I have to make this call? Do I have to do this text? Or can I pay attention to my driving? Thank you.
We'll open it up for questions for anybody up front.
Strikes me as the simplest way for the public maybe to grasp this, if they want to go into full compliance, this is probably a question for you, Colonel, is if you have a smartphone and a modern car, integrate it, the phone into the car, and then things will naturally be compliant and they'll be hands-free, especially if you don't disturb while driving. If you don't, though, have a modern car and you can't integrate the phone, is it good standard you can't pick up the phone, can't put it in your hand? Is that sort of make sense?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the one easy way to just strip right down to the brass tacks is to say you can't hold the phone while you're driving. There are subsequent questions that spin off of that, but if that's the only thing people hear from us, that's good. You can't hold the phone while driving. Options are, of course, connecting through Bluetooth in your car. If you have a phone or a car where that doesn't work, other options include using the phone on speaker mode. Other options include using a headphone. If you do that, you can only have it in one ear, not both. An auxiliary cable. So on the handsfreemn.org website, you'll find resources including a list of options available to you. One thing we've found is a lot of Minnesotans have technology available to them that they haven't yet learned because they're just in the habit of holding the phone. And so you may just want to sit down and try to figure out some of that technology, because when I talk to people, once they make that behavioral change, they're happy about it. But it's making that change and learning how that technology can help you. And the simplest, cheapest available option for everyone is to just not use the phone while driving.
talk a little bit about just enforcement and how that will go? Will it be like a visual thing that your troopers will look at, or how will that work?
It is all visual, so troopers watch motorists, they watch for behaviors, it's nothing new for them. And so what law enforcement will do is look for those behaviors, and it's not hard to pick out. Come August 1st, if you're driving down the road with the phone up to your head, it's obviously going to be in violation. If you pull up to a stop sign and you see someone composing a text message, it's obviously going to be in violation. One, because they're holding their phone, and two, because you can see they're doing more than single touch activation to get into hands-free mode. So part of the legislative intent behind this law, as we talked about developing this law over the years, was to provide the tools for law enforcement to more effectively enforce the current texting while driving law. And the other piece was to more effectively educate the public that you just can't hold the phone and you can't manipulate your phone to create text messages, game, watch videos, or other things for obvious reasons, because it's incredibly dangerous.
What are some of the penalties that a violating driver could face?
So for a first offense, a driver should expect to pay about $130. Subsequent offenses should be over $300. Our goal is not to write a lot of tickets with it. We certainly will starting August 1st for those that aren't listening to our educational messages in advance. But really right now we're focusing really hard. All of our effort is on education to prevent the enforcement, which will prevent the fatal and serious injury crashes that we see across our state.
How big is the problem, and how much education do you think is needed?
I'll ask Director Hanson to talk about some numbers.
Good question. The problem, anybody who spends any time at all on a Minnesota road, all you have to do is, when it's safe to do so or when you're a passenger, is take a look at what's going on around you. We've heard the word and we've used the word epidemic. It is that pervasive in our culture, our attachment and our dependency on those electronic devices. So this is something that it does require that cultural change. It's a habit change. It's a behavior change. They say it takes about 30 days for us to change our habits. And so the time to start is now, is not waiting until August 1st. Identify what your option is now, change your behavior. A, Minnesota roads are going to be safer because of that, and B, you're not going to have to worry about the consequence phase that kicks in come August 1st. So it is a substantial problem on our roads, and it's hard to quantify because sometimes it's hard to determine what exactly led to a crash. But we know that it is a huge problem, and it's going to require every Minnesotan and every driver to make those good decisions behind the wheel, to be engaged with the driving task and not distracted by that electronic device or something else in the vehicle.
Can you talk about the new standards for younger drivers, those with provisional licenses?
Yep. So there is also a flyer that's put out. The Minnesota Safety Council has helped as part of their education on young drivers, and again the website that we reference, handsfreemn.org, for resources on that. If you're a provisional license holder, you cannot use the phone while driving. There's a few exceptions under the law. School bus drivers cannot use the phone while driving at all. So a provisional license holder with hands-free really doesn't apply because they cannot use the phone with a provisional license. The exception under the provisional license law is that they can use the phone as a GPS. So that's where the hands-free law kicks in, is that if they're using that phone as a GPS under a provisional license, they have to do it only in hands-free mode.
If I'm not a provisional, GPS on the phone, program it before I go, and then I could touch it once to get to the next map. Can you just make sure that I understand exactly what you can and can't do with the GPS on your phone?
Yep, if you're using your phone as a GPS, it can only be used in hands-free mode. You can use single touch activation to get into hands-free mode. So I think, the reality of it is, as wonderful as those GPS systems are, it's awfully difficult sometimes to enter the address in. And so if you're entering an address in with your hands, with your fingers, don't do that while driving. That's a terrible decision today or August 1st. Hands-free mode is the only option for entering those addresses in. So program them ahead of time. Again, technology is your friend. If you're using those apps, you can generally program your usual destinations, and then you can just tap and go. You don't have to enter your home address each time. The technology will help you do that, but it's a behavioral learning curve to figure that out sometimes, even though it's right in front of you today.
Is a follow-up on that, the one-touch mode, the little microphone icon that shows up next to the text field in a lot of apps, is that can you one-touch that and then speak your destination address in?
Great question. That's the logic behind single touch. So you may have to touch your phone once to get it to wake up, and you may have to touch it again to speak that voice command. That's legal using single touch activation, which is different than touching the phone only one time.
It's legal to do what you just described.
Correct. Using single touch activation. Yeah. What is illegal would be picking up your phone, or your phone's on your dashboard and you touching it 10 times to dial a phone number. That would not be considered single touch activation.
Other than pressuring employers in this kind of way to kind of comply, would you guys go as far as to recommend like an employer purchase hands-free devices so that their employees can utilize it? What are some of your plans for that?
Yeah, the range of options that employers have is very broad. From Cargill's example, where they basically told all their employees, you cannot use your phone in your car, period. End of sentence. Or, an implementation of Bluetooth speakers that you put in all your old cars that you hang on the dash or up on the ceiling, so you can actually implement a more of a voice-activated hands-free system. Those are all fair game. The real key for the employers is to ask themselves where their risks are as an employer. Because you have to watch two things very closely. You got to make sure your employees are safe for two reasons. Number one, they're humans. You want them to be safe. Number two, you want them back at work the next day. You want them to be able to go home safe. That's all important. And then on the other side, you have this business to run, and crashes cost a lot of money. And if you start to talk to employers, they will tell you that their number one risk is crashes. The top three reasons that people die on the job in Minnesota are driving related. So there's a good reason to think about that liability side of your business too, and do something to lower that risk, whether it's fully banning phones or going more hands-free or doing some other restriction. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of model policies out there. We can get people access to them if they'd like them. There's been a lot of different things adopted, but it all boils down to keep people safe, and let's not lose dollars we don't have to at the same time. Can I talk to that question about the frequency of the problem just for a second? Great question. Some national survey work would suggest that over 80% of drivers report touching their phones or interacting with their phones on a given drive. When we heard these kinds of numbers, these are just survey numbers, so are they absolutely across the board? Hard to say, but it is data. When we saw those numbers, all of our jaws hit the floor. The little silver lining was that the length of interaction with the phones were pretty short, like less than a minute for a lot of that stuff in the survey. So I think it's fair to say we all suspect, and some of this survey information shows, there's a ton of phone use in the car. What we're trying to do with hands-free is change how people use it and then reduce that use to reduce the risk. Georgia is about a year ahead of us in their implementation of the hands-free law. And there's some information coming out of the cell phone use world in Atlanta that their traffic is down on their cell systems. There's also some anecdotal information out of Atlanta that their traffic jams have gotten better because there's not that inevitable delay when people are doing the cell phone prayer when they're typing in installed traffic, and then they're slow to restart. So those are just examples of extended use. That's the best we've got, but we do think it's extensive enough to warrant this kind of work.
Is there any anecdotal evidence that just the publicity around the legislation being passed here has started getting motorists to change, or are you starting from a square one with kind of an overall clueless populace?
Great question. Number one, there's extremely high public support. So when we're out at events or I'm speaking to groups, everybody is in favor. And I say everybody, almost. Very, very few people come forward and say that this is unnecessary or ridiculous. There are a few, but we talk to them about why they think that. To answer your question specifically, there are people driving around today that think it already is the law. And we're thankful for those people because they're already there. There are some people very few people that say they haven't heard anything about it. And then there's a lot of people that said, oh yeah, I heard about that hands-free. It's about time. What do I need to know about that? And so we're trying to hit the latter two, the ones that are already complying, wonderful. The other two that either don't like it or didn't hear about it or have some questions are the ones that we're really trying to reach through this collaborative effort.
Out-of-state people, how are you going to let people know at the borders when they come into the state or when they land and go to rent a car that this is the law and how to follow it?
It's a great question, and it happens when you cross those borders into different states. We get that question a lot on equipment violations. The reality is anybody coming to Minnesota has to comply with Minnesota law on this issue. It's not new, so if you travel to certain cities right now, this is not a novel concept in the United States. We're the 15th state to get there, 18th, and then Tennessee just signed on, so there's some argument where we'll fall in line with them, but cities have been doing this for quite a while, so people traveling to Minnesota, we hope that they can become educated and follow common sense, which would say put the phone down while driving, but we'll work with our partners, work with DOT and local agencies to publicize it, and just like you see the signs that say slower traffic, move right, there's opportunity to educate Minnesotans as they arrive into Minnesota.
Yeah, is there a billboard going, are there billboards going on?
Billboards are certainly part of our larger outreach and education campaign. And as the Colonel alluded to, we are working with MnDOT to get those, at those major ports of entry or crossing points to get something up similar to when the primary seatbelt law passed, where seatbelt use required, because we do have a lot of transient folks that visit Minnesota, and so we want to make sure that we're reaching out not only to all of Minnesota, but to everybody who travels through Minnesota. And we're working closely with our MnDOT partners on that.
One more? Anybody? Go ahead.
A question for the nurse. If you could just explain a little bit about how you're gonna, or what you're gonna hand out to the people, and is it just the emergency room? Is it everybody coming through your hospitals?
So for right now, we're using the emergency department, patients, visitors, and staff as our primary contact, but and we were lucky to get the DPS brochure sent to us, so we will be distributing those throughout our 12 emergency department areas. The plan, though, is to also include our clinics. As you can imagine, a company like Fairview and Health East have a lot of doctors' offices and clinics and outpatient areas, so we'll be moving the word out that way. Focusing on the emergency department for traffic is our biggest touch point right now. And part of that is people come to us and expect to get care information, not only for the injury that or the illness that brought them to the emergency department, but when we give discharge instructions, we also remind people of other things like wear your seatbelts, get your flu shots, immunize your kids. So this is just another way for us to educate our patient population.
It's not just crash victims, it'll be...
Oh, absolutely not. It's no, that could be perceived as rubbing a little salt in the wound, per se. But it's more of a broader education for our group. Obviously, our registered nurses in the emergency department are very aware of opportunities for patient education, and we choose that carefully so that we wouldn't be insensitive to a patient or family's needs that might have another tragedy that they're dealing with, rather than give them a hands-free brochure.
We'll wrap it up. Our speakers will be available afterward if you have any follow-up, but thank you all very much.